the front of the bed. My energy is a little disrupted today. I found out that my apprentice had died last week. And so I've been sitting with his family and other close friends for the last few days, and this is my first day sliding back into normal rhythm. So there's some heaviness. James? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. We had been really close before we started working together, and he was really gifted. We were really excited to see where he took his beautiful skills and intuitions. So that will be a long process.
I assume it was a sudden, unexpected.
It was, yes. It was a car accident. So there was no lead up, no warning. Exactly.
Well, I hope you didn't suffer.
It appears it was very fast. Thank you. So today we're working on the endocrine system. And then we'll get to tie that into some of our kind of basic energetics as well, because that kind of intersection of the nervous system and the endocrine system is kind of where the electrical and chemical material reality kind of come together, and that's the base site of where we as physical bodies kind of transmute energetically as well. So that's one of my favorites, and I am excited to go through it with you guys. Let's take our first little window. Have you guys done any like work with chakras specifically before?
There's a big flower over your head.
The big flower over your head. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll keep it. We don't have to like dive too deep into the philosophical sides of it, but in terms of how that intersects with the known physical features in the body is super interesting. So I want to spend some time going over that. But let's just kind of orient ourselves and tune in with the chakras this morning. It's bouncing the camera, sorry. Okay. So go ahead and get kind of comfortable. And start those sweeps through the body. Maybe a little extra effort to kind of unhook our outside sounds from that level of stimulation, but just let your body know that that information is not what you need to receive impact from. Inside information, we can give it a chance to turn up. And let's start down at the root and just tune into the location of the root chakra. That's going to be basically right at the perineum, where if you're sitting up straight, it's a little ahead of where your body weight is resting on your seat, most likely. And this center is associated with the color red, so just hold the light of awareness and recognize the red tonality at that center. And let that clarity of the color become more intense, just holding that parallel awareness of the location in your body and the sensation of red with a few breaths. And slide up just within the spine to the navel chakra. So it'll usually be kind of directly behind the belly button against the spine, or maybe an inch or two lower. So if you have a sense of where that is, let your attention rest there. And this one will be more of an amber or orange tone. So just hold that awareness of that space, the sensation of the breath, amber color. And slide up to the solar plexus. So that'll be the point between your rib cage in the front, but drop back deeper into your body, more towards the spine there. So this is right along with your diaphragm, lighting up there. And this one will be golden. So simply find that location and hold that golden tone. Color strengthen. And rise up to the heart center, right on parallel with your heart, but still centered along the spine. This will be a green tone. You can feel that we've got a rainbow building up within us. We've got the green tone right here in the middle, intersecting those warm colors of the lower chakras to the cooler tones we'll move into as we rise. For a few breaths. Lifting up again to the throat, sitting just above the clavicles here. This one will be more of a aqua type blue. As your attention rests on that center, just be aware of how it naturally loosens around it. The muscles nearby get an impulse of relaxation. And then following the spine up. This one you'll find almost more at the base of the skull, still right along the spine, just within the spine. And pull a little further forward so that we're in that lower brain, brainstem, hindbrain. And this one's a richer blue, navy blue, indigo kind of color. Sit like that there, just within the occiput. And if you follow up to the true crown of your head and just think back down within a couple inches. Be at that third eye. This is pretty deep within the brain. And we've got a violet tone here, like a royal purple. Just hold that color and that sensation. Continue breathing. We're just lightly orienting to each of these spaces. And then many practitioners from all over the world have been aware of a sensation and come to honor a location about a foot to maybe 18 inches above your head, which is often pictured as a diamond or even a halo, a clear white integration of that prism of tones and colors within you. So just hold that space above the head for a moment and see if that resonates for you. With a few breaths, drawing you into alignment and lifting you up. As you get that imagination, sensation, intuition, sense of clarity of that point above the head, let it just cascade down over you like a clear rain, like an energetic cleanse, rinsing everything back down and kind of purifying and clarifying. And again, we always benefit from taking a moment to just register the love within us, the interconnection of love throughout our world with all our people and the choices we've made in our lives and what we have to give. And return to the skin and join us back in the room. Okay. So first, let's go through the endocrine system. If you want to check in on the Mosbys, we've got a bit of a map on 161. So that's nice to have that visual. And since we just kind of swept through the body, you may be able to quickly recognize that each of those locations where we've associated the chakras, we also have Mosbys highlighting for us endocrine glands. So just keep that sense of there's a connection in space directly with the endocrine glands, okay? So let's start out with the endocrine system. This is one that a lot of us are a little bit less familiar with. And when you do hear people talk about it in a more kind of public, layman's terms, passing facts around on the internet kind of thing, we'll often be hearing about hormones. So this is our center of the hormones. So with that in mind, what can you guys tell me about the endocrine system already?
Well, I imagine that it is where your secondary sex characteristics come into play.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Secondary sex characteristics. Yeah. What else?
The mama of them all, the mama gland is the pituitary gland.
Mama gland. Mama, sometimes they'll say master gland.
Master gland.
Yeah.
Sounds like a man's name.
I like your reinterpretation. Gland.
Glands.
Uh-huh.
Everything is very feminine
Okay.
right now.
So you're saying the pituitary gland. Yeah. Pituitary gland. Yep.
This pineal gland,
Mm-hmm.
is it
Yeah, pineal, or you'll hear it either way. Pineal, pineal.
There's some talk about that.
Talk about that.
There's
Tell me the
talk.
talk about that.
There's a buzz going about the pineal gland.
Yes.
They're
Yeah,
saying
get us updated. What's the buzz?
the scuttlebutt is
Uh-huh.
that the pineal or pineal gland is a great mystery of yes, right, of possibly connecting us with
Yeah.
ancient, very ancient instincts and
Ancient
wisdom.
instincts and wisdom?
In the third eye.
Awesome. Yeah. Instincts. Okay, I like that.
That we don't know what that's all about,
Yes.
and maybe we're not supposed to know. Maybe it's
Yes.
supposed to be a mystery. Maybe we're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
just trust that it's doing things that
Trust.
we need it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, definitely on a mechanical chemical level, we've seen some really interesting developments with the chemistry of the pineal gland, and even the last few years this continues to develop. We'll dive in a little deeper on that, but the main chemical that we've been able to track for quite a while coming out of the pineal gland is melatonin, right? So this is the basically site where the body takes the action of sending us towards sleep and alters our consciousness from the alert state into sleep. But we're also discovering that there's a cascade of really interesting chemicals coming out of the kind of sequence of melatonin, and that as it breaks and evolves and kind of shifts, that we're also emitting a super wide range of trace chemicals that have been like hard to kind of capture, including the chemistry that's responsible for the bioluminescence of electrical eels, and also DMT that we're producing endogenously. So that's pretty fascinating. Some ancient wisdom and instincts going crazy up there. Very magical. Let's put that down. I don't mind. Magical. Yeah.
So if we're taking a psychedelic drug, is that where what stimulating the response is up there in that gland?
I mean, I can only imagine that, especially the chemicals that are endogenously produced. You guys, have we talked about endogenous versus exogenous? Okay, that'll be in this lesson. But for this moment, suffice it to say, endogenous means produced within, generated within. Endo, like interior, kind of endogenous. This is generated, genesis, made, begun. Okay? Yeah. So those endogenous chemicals going on here, we have receptors for. We have kind of complex set of reception there. What else do we already know? What can you tell me? Because that's okay if this whole system's a little more mysterious. Just the endocrine system generally. Yeah.
Well, let's see. We got your pituitary, which that's responsible for
We've got that there.
triggering your secondary sex characteristics, right?
Gives a lot of instructions. Yeah, kind of chemical instructions.
You can have hormone deficiencies.
Deficiencies. This is an idea we need to be aware of.
Or super excited hormones that are, pushing out too much growth hormone, for instance.
Excitable.
You get extra tall, giant, what do they call that syndrome?
Yeah,
From a
giantism.
Giantism. Long neck syndrome.
Me.
All right.
And so, I have no idea about the hypothalamus.
Okay. We'll jump in there.
adrenals, that's all about your
Nice.
getting
Adrenal glands.
energy to get going and do stuff. Like we have coffee in the morning,
Uh-huh.
and I think that if you do too much of that for too long, you're suppressing your adrenals, and they're like, well, what do we have? We don't have to do anything.
Right,
We've got
right.
coffee and caffeine and
That
other
will
stimulants.
cause imbalance sometimes when we, exactly, stimulate a different way.
And then I
That can
skipped
be.
over the thyroid and the parathyroids and the thymus to go down to the pancreas and
Okay.
the pancreatic islets. Islets?
Islet, yeah.
Am I getting this right off of memory that the pancreas is below the stomach and helps filter out stomach?
We got kind of a little below, a little behind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that help with the acid in the stomach?
Yeah, it kind of compensates for the acidity of the stomach acid before it hits the intestines, so that our intestines don't have to be so powerfully protected and insulated with all those rugae chemicals of the stomach there.
So that one's in the endocrine system and the digestive system.
Yes, you're picking up that there's a fair amount of overlap. We've got several of the digestive system organs are also really profound influencers of the hormonal system. Yeah.
Just to throw it out there, because that would be cool if it was. Are there leukocytes in the endocrine system? Are they like blood cells?
Well, there's a blood supply to every organ, right? And so leukocytes are definitely coming up pretty close. They're involved in the protection of the endocrine system. Okay, let's shift into, I can see, as predicted, we don't have quite as much built into us. This is pretty typical that the endocrine system is a little more mysterious. We learned a lot about our bones in preschool, kindergarten, all the way up, and the endocrine system not so much. Okay, so sliding in through there, we've got a few key glands that we want to make sure that we cover, and I will go through maybe in the same order that we did the chakras to open up. We've got the gonads, and this is our general term for sex organs that are hormone producers. And so the ovaries and the testes will both fall under this category. Gonads being at our lowest point there. We've got a fair amount of important chemistry coming out of the kidneys. So that brings us up pretty high. Of course, the testes on a male are significantly lower than the ovaries on a female, so that's a little bit different areas, locations, keeping track of that, but good to know. Kidneys, we've got the pancreas is also involved here, as you pointed out. On the level of the heart itself is an important producer of hormones, and it's paired right along with the thymus. They're sitting together. Okay. Yeah. We've got the kidneys, of course, are with the adrenal glands. Adrenal glands actually rest on the kidneys. So I'll fill that in as well. And up above, the next level above the heart and the thymus, we have the thyroid. then as Karen mentioned, we have the pituitary, or was it Ava said pituitary first? And then Karen said pineal.
The same person.
You're blended.
Sometimes.
Ooh, blended them together. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, and these are, let's call it that for right now. You can kind of unpack a little bit more of some of this regional stuff, but I think this is a okay start for us. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and get this concept of what is a hormone and why we have so many different glands and they're all making like signature different hormones in each gland, right? So what is a hormone? What does that do?
It seems like it balances the system and regulates things like, well, it seems like it regulates things like emotions. Because when your hormones are out of whack, you're crying so much, you get excited about, like when you're a teenager, you get all excited about a date, you know.
Sure. Yeah. The chemistry of hormones.
Your sexual, your libido.
Libido, sex drive, it's interconnected. Emotions.
There's hormones of pregnancy.
Yes.
That can grow a baby and tell it what to do and what to be.
Give some
it's
signals.
Gonna be a boy or a girl, and it's such a mystery what the hormones do.
All right. Well, they do a lot, so that makes sense. It's such a cloud of craziness. But let's boil down the kind of fundamental classification of what makes something a hormone or not is that it is a chemical messenger. And so the cells throughout the body are covered in, we've talked about the plasma layer of the cell, right? And on the exterior of this plasma layer of every cell, we have what you can think of as a bunch of different locks built in to the cell wall. And these are all quite unique. And the hormones are the keys. So they're the chemical configurations that are able to intersect with specific locks on the exterior of these cellular walls. And so they really are extraordinarily efficient in communicating the desired behavior from the central system, where we have the nervous system and the other like kind of chemical cascades that are giving instructions to these endocrine organs. And then the endocrine organs disseminate that out, like publishing a newspaper about what's going on in the body. And these messages in the form of unique chemical structures arrive to every individual cell. Once they arrive, they don't actually generally enter the cell. Sometimes they're re-released and recycled. But when this receptor on the exterior of the cell is stimulated, activated, it will actually communicate directly into the DNA, and it will change the production of proteins and like ultimately alter the behavior of the cell such that we get quite different results in how we feel, how we act, how our impulses are driven. Does that make sense?
So it's the receptors communicate with or stimulate changes in your DNA.
Right. They can make adjustments.
Altering the behavior of the cell.
Right.
Also altering the behavior of the human.
Absolutely, because we are composed of those proteins. Those are the structural building blocks that we're working with in terms of action within the body. We can build tissue mainly out of proteins. And even when it's not directly out of proteins, such as much of the bone is calcium, that it has to be operated and modulated by protein-based cells in order to build that structure, so it has an infrastructure that is undergirded by proteins as well. So the DNA changes itself to some extent, but what's going on with DNA fundamentally that is like so key is the DNA holds, I'm sure you've heard the blueprint, it holds the instructions, right? But it's not just, I wish we had time to go deeper into like cellular biology, but it's not just that the DNA is telling the other stuff what to do, it's actually integrated in a very complex kind of little cellular factory where you have the proteins that the cell is trying to compose in order to execute its cellular behavior is being made off of the DNA, like almost more like a sewing pattern than a blueprint, that they're using the shape of the DNA to write and then rip off the script of the proteins that are finished. Does that make sense? And so once we start having different parts of the DNA be instructed to activate by these chemical messengers from the outside, it can be different segments of DNA need to get copied. It can be some of the epigenetics in terms of places where the DNA has a couple different options that can be switched across so that it's presenting differently. So ultimately, we get a huge amount of impact on the very basic cellular level of the body by adjusting the instructions of how to use the DNA that's inside of every individual cell. So as the endocrine system is operating, the hormones sending them out, this is the key, is if there are receptors on the cell walls that allow these messages to become instructions about how to use the DNA, that's what makes this a hormone. Really interestingly, we're going to draw a distinction between hormones and neurotransmitters, even though most of them are chemically identical. When a hormone happens on the cell, this is a hormonal event, but the exact same chemical may also be emitted and recepted in the synapse of neurons. And so when it comes across a channel where you've got like this spray of chemistry coming out of one neuron into that synaptic gap and arriving at the next neuron and sending so we've got a chemical transmission here that's turning into electrical signals inside of that next neuron, then this is a neurotransmitter. They certainly could have electrical variations, because remember, every cell is also fundamentally a battery, because we have a differential of charge from the interior of the cell into that interstitial fluid that it's swimming in, right?
So the difference is no instructions on the neuron, the way that there are on a cell with hormonal glands, right?
It may not be adjusting or necessarily, because the neurons are not generally building a lot of proteins other than their own little system that they're healing and repairing their own set of material. But that when it becomes, the chemical instruction basically is translated into more direct electrical signal, and that's how the message is going across. So it's like we're right on that weird cusp where there's a little bit of chemical action and a little bit of electrical action in both cases. So it's not really defined by is it chemical or is it electrical, but it's the location. If this is happening in a synaptic gap, it's a neurotransmitter. If it's eventually arriving onto a different type of cell wall, then we're going to call it a hormone. And that allows it to interface and interact with a huge variety of tissues throughout the body, that we have like all of these highly specialized, specific organs distributed with like such wild, varied behaviors and responsibilities inside the body. And so those are under the influence of the endocrine system, the hormonal transmission.
And does the pituitary gland transmit different hormones and different chemicals to each gland, or do they transform once they reach the gland?
Okay, yeah. So when you have this idea of the pituitary gland, when we call it the master gland, the pituitary gland has a extraordinary variety of instructions that it can release out to the rest of the glands, and it does talk more directly to the other endocrine glands, whereas the kind of further down the cascade, they're going to basically receive the message and do the job, whereas the pituitary gland is receiving the message and translating the message for somebody else and kind of coordinating that instruction. I always think it's a little bit more, like it would be more efficient to think of the pituitary gland as like the first mate in a way, in that it's not necessarily deciding how to sail, but it's getting the instruction to the rest of the crew. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's calling orders. Okay. So this is our distinction. I'll give you a second to kind of catch that up. Yeah.
How are they,
Never mind.
I'm
Okay.
very curious about, you know how you're saying that the autonomic
Yeah.
system
Yes.
can be, we can suggest changes to our body,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's like we got this, but we can consciously
Right.
make adjustments. or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wondering about the endocrine system. Obviously, that's part of the body. We should be able to suggest, I think I'm going to get pregnant today. You know, even as extreme as that, you know, willing yourself to be.
Yeah. So Karen's saying, even though the endocrine system is obviously largely under that autonomic nervous system influence, we do know that we can create so much dynamic influence over the autonomic nervous system from a conscious level. So that really taps into a lot of what is at the core of the value of meditation, right? Is we're actually able to train the different glands to communicate more efficiently, more effective messages, more accurate messages. And this is just through practice. So you can go at it from, there are traditional methods that have been rediscovered all over the world where you can really use more imagery and suggestion and kind of the concepts of light and sensations to kind of influence that. It can be very effective. There are some meditative practices that have been more developed or honed in recent years that are more direct to this more modern kind of Western understanding of the specific hormones that you may want to influence in specific ways and the systems involved in that.
Ooh, weird question.
Yes.
If you're American Psycho, if you're a psychopath,
Uh-huh.
do you have more hormonal problems, or like does that influence your ability to feel emotions?
That is a really great question. So in
Let's cut one open.
terms yeah. I was asking about, like, do basically psychopaths have visibly different hormonal infrastructure? I will not claim that I have looked at specific research on that, so we'll set that in now I'm in a speculative category, okay?
The witches want to know.
Right, witches want to know. Okay. People vary widely. Obviously, like, this is a lot of different glands. This is not even necessarily every gland that's making endocrine technology. Like, this is not all of it. But there's a lot of different things here, and then we've got like hundreds of chemicals that are distributed between the production responsibility. So like every person, obviously, like your endocrine system and the pattern of behavior of the endocrine system is like much more unique than your fingertip, right? There's just so many factors going on there. So could we find patterns between people with like really disturbed consciousness rhythms? Like, we're definitely looking at that. Like, there's a lot of research going on, but I think right now more of the research is focused on what can we see on a neuronal level, because it's a lot easier to stick someone in an MRI than to like measure and map all the different chemicals. So right now it's easier to find out about the like electrical side of what's going on with visible kind of psychiatric disruption.
Was it here that we were talking about a bunch of different people had been put through an MRI is a brain scan, right?
Yeah,
So
magnetic resonance imaging.
they took like, oh, it was a TED Talk. It was a TED Talk. Like 10 years ago, this guy was talking about how effective it would be if like therapists and psychologists actually could see what they were diagnosing, and how he was encouraging like a lot more MRI scans, because it's like one of the only fields where they don't look at
Right,
what
exactly.
they're dealing with.
Exactly, but
But that just
yeah,
reminded me of that.
absolutely. And of course, we can get a lot of information about this from blood work. And so that's normally how we'll go about our preliminary investigation of what's going on the endocrinological level.
Flipology.
Phlebotomy. Yeah. Okay, so let's crash through and get, well, I still have this screen on. Let's get an idea of some of the main actual hormones that are going on here. Tell me hormones that you already know of. I get that. Epinephrine. All right. Yep. Oh, what's that? Yeah. Yeah.
You got your estrogen, your testosterone.
Estrogen,
your,
testosterone.
Androgen.
Mm-hmm.
You got your adrenaline.
That's epinephrine.
Oh, epinephrine. Okay.
And then there's norepinephrine.
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 Yeah. Norepinephrine. Melatonin. Serotonin. Yep.
Is dopamine?
Yeah. Dopamine, we're going to see more conversation about it as a neurotransmitter, but it's a big piece of what's going on in the brain for sure. Okay. So some of the big main concerns that the endocrine system is trying to address is definitely we've got sex characteristics and reproduction. Okay. So on that level, we're going to have estrogen, mainly produced in the ovaries. Yep. Testosterone. In the testes. We've got androgen. Or the androgens, there's kind of a group of them. Those are all influencing pretty directly. We're also going to have a certain amount of progesterone. And this is a really interesting one because it's going to switch. So we've got here promoting, yeah. This is gestation. So this is progesterone amplifier of the reproductive set of hormones. Progesterone tells the uterus not to shed the uterine lining and to retain the contents of the uterus for active pregnancy. But it's going to be produced in a bit more moderate batch right leading up to menstruation. So basically when the volume of progesterone crashes out, that's what triggers menstruation in women.
What about menopause? What triggers menopause? Just a lack of there?
Menopause is more as the ovaries withdraw from such rhythmic production. Then there's like the cascade of the other hormonal effects in the body of having been kind of dependent on that cycle of estrogen, progesterone.
They're like we're having withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, kind of withdrawal symptoms.
What
Yeah.
is my sex drive?
Right.
What?
Right.
Yeah,
It impacts a lot. So as we approach menstruation, that progesterone level will actually kind of tick up, and then crash out as the ovaries stop producing that. However, if an egg has successfully implanted in the endometrium, so in the lining of the uterus, the egg itself will be starting to develop its little pocket of like where it's going to build the placenta and stuff. And this site will start spewing out progesterone.
Oh,
So it's the egg itself
the egg is
starts
doing that.
determining, instead of the mother's body, whether or not the uterine lining sheds.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
come on,
exactly.
I'm here.
So it's that successful implantation is going to trigger the
Zygote.
progesterone. Exactly. The fertilized egg, the zygote. Yep. And let's see.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a cool one.
It turns into its own. It turns itself into the an endocrine gland.
Uh-huh.
The,
Yeah, the placenta is very productive on a hormonal level. Yeah. And then the testosterone is influencing the development of male sex characteristics. It's going to be relatively low, but very present, obviously, in like pre-adolescent males. And it accelerates quite a bit through puberty, just as estrogen is accelerating in puberty for our female bodies. And so the testosterone has an impact throughout the system as well. So it has a pretty profound ability to direct blood flow because of its impact on the circulatory system, and is gonna have an impact even like inside of the brain. It's arriving and being read as well. So we have some kind of non-negotiable features of what's going on inside of male bodies versus female bodies, that we're more and more kind of developing technologies where we can have more choice to adjust that with hormone replacement therapy, whether it's for people who are moving out of the reproductive span of life but would like to retain some of their sex characteristics longer, or people who would like to be physically expressing sex characteristics that are not being endogenously produced in their body at the same rate. So this is really interesting. We're in an interesting time of like kind of redesigning, reworking our ethics and awareness of the health impacts of all of these different higher caliber choices that we have in our environments. But of course, people have been fiddling with this for like ever since the dawn of time. We're very aware of a lot of different herbal
like sassafras
influences.
increase
Yeah.
your hormone. I think testosterone is.
Right. You can absolutely promote the production of any of these sex characteristic hormones with a certain amount of like herbal supplementation, and they're also very behaviorally influenced. Where as much as like female bodies are not equipped with like quite so much an entire pair of glands that are devoted to the production of testosterone, right? we can actually elevate our testosterone quite a bit by engaging in what we would think of as more typically male behaviors, to the extent that like women who are doing a lot of heavy lifting, women who are under the kind of like battle pressure that we've put a lot of male soldiers through, will actually have recession of menstruation in people who are really engaging in behaviors that demand more testosterone out of the body in order to function.
So this is another example of us influencing our autonomic system by our behavior, and
Right.
We
Yeah.
want to do these jobs that are traditionally, stereotypically men jobs, and then we build up those muscles, and
Right.
our body answers and said, okay.
Exactly.
You need these things. You need to do this, and so we're going to
Yeah.
create this environment, this
Right.
physical body.
Oh, yes, and we've had this window of time where there's been like so much kind of reactive or extractive or like fear, like there's so much loaded energy as people are trying to like figure out who they are, who they want to be, and how they want to influence their own body, what they can tolerate in terms of public perception and judgment and all of this stuff. But I think that like this is just kind of a glitchy little social transition point where we're coming into the cusp of being able to recognize the extraordinary amount of conscious impact that we can choose for ourselves in our body, and especially as we add these like technological layers to give us an even bigger palette of options on gender and sexual expression. It's really fascinating. We haven't hit the ceiling yet. We don't know what we could possibly accomplish there. So that's pretty interesting. Moving up into the adrenals, kidneys, pancreas zone, obviously we're going to have a lot of influence on the digestive system, especially through the pancreas. We're going to have, because as we kind of established yesterday, last week, whenever we did it, the pancreas is going to have a big impact on the digestive process as it like mitigates the acidity of material coming out of the stomach and moving into the intestines. And then the kidneys as well are going to have a huge amount of impact on the levels of hydration in the body, that they're really determining how much we allow specific salts that are being moderated to like keep recirculating in the body, and then they're going to be extracting out the fluid. So we've got chemistry coming out of the hormones like that antidiuretic hormone that are going to be really communicating with the body about the retention of water. Putting this in order, what should we hit here? Yeah, the thymus is going to be generating a huge amount of our communication around the immune system, actually. So the thymus is equipped to read what's going on with all those leukocytes and kind of create more coordinating, effective behavior for the body around that. So in addition to our regulation of the fluidity of the body, the kidneys, the pancreas are going to have a lot of impact on the digestion process, like which nutrients we're attempting to really extract from the food, what we want to build out and retain there. And then of course the adrenal glands. Karen already started talking about how much the adrenals are involved in just the level of available energy, and that's really like at every cell level. We're picking up that adrenaline and also cortisol. Adrenaline is a really fast released kind of chemical where you get that like immediate impact on the breath rate, on the heart. So this is our cellular tissues of the heart are registering the little key signature, and just changing their behavior from within right away. Okay, the cellular tissues of the lungs are responding as they hit that, like receive the adrenaline. And then also cortisol. Cortisol is going to hit a lot of the same behaviors, but it's a slower burning kind of chemical that is slower to clear out of your system after you're done using it as well. And so when you have like this kind of chronic stress, adrenal fatigue stuff, you've got this flopping, like high frequency surge of adrenaline just like bashing out into your system, but you also are riding a really heightened level of cortisol kind of continually. So on the most fundamental level, adrenaline and cortisol are going to basically allow us to respond to danger. They're there for us to evacuate from danger as quickly as possible. They also give us quite a lot of ability to kind of seize opportunities that arise in our environment, but on some level, on an evolutionary basis, right, those opportunities are important to us because we don't want to go back to having no food laying around. So if we have a sudden opportunity to run after this animal or like really gather a lot of resources, the fear of loss or the fear of lack is kind of biologically driving either set of behavior, right? And so adrenaline and cortisol fundamentally allow us to activate fear, okay? So at the level of the heart and the thymus, we're gonna have a much higher production of oxytocin. This is a counterpoint because oxytocin is the chemistry that we're going to emit when we are having a long embrace. It takes about 8 seconds of a hug to start a cascade of oxytocin in the body. So if you're like feeling quite comfortable with somebody and you're able to settle into that and hold them for a little longer, you're going to start producing this. We get oxytocin spiking when we pet our pets. Sit with children, like any of these like moments of like real warmth and interconnection between humans. Oxytocin is kind of the initiator of the milk letdown reflex with nursing mothers that like as the nipples are stimulated, they're gonna start triggering production of oxytocin, and that's gonna kind of cycle. So you've got prolactin also is important there, and that's gonna stimulate the production of the milk, prolactin, yeah. But it's the oxytocin that really gives us that official, like, we are holding the baby, and the oxytocin is going to spike in both the mother and the baby when that happens. Oxytocin is also the chemical that's really at the forefront for orgasm, the cascade of like muscular spasm throughout the perineum and other associated sensations of sexual contact are really mitigated by oxytocin. So we're starting to build up this picture, right? Oxytocin is the chemistry that is accompanying love. And what's really interesting is that we've got these like sages from all over the world, from every spiritual tradition, kind of coming up with different ways of expressing to us that love is greater than fear. On a chemical level, this is true. That releasing and cascading oxytocin inhibits the production of adrenaline and cortisol.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good news.
Good news. Yeah. So this is one of these places where we can like really access and kind of like build a sensation right away of the impact that we have on an autonomic level when we rehearse the production of oxytocin, when we get more consciously equipped to decide to cascade oxytocin, to meditate on love, to engage in metta, Buddhist meditation that centers on the sensation of love and the expansion of love. We literally become more structurally, chemically equipped to manage our fear reflexes and to diminish the amount and the level of impact that our fear chemistry is going to have on our behavior and our cellular behavior.
Wow.
It's epic.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super beautiful.
Boy, oh my gosh, that's why restauranting is like so intense.
So you mentioned the heart.
Yes.
Is all that happening in the thymus?
The heart is also engaged in that. Let me make sure I'm like right on track here. So the heart specifically is going to be producing mainly atrial natriuretic peptide. That's what the heart is known for. And basically that is used within the heart, that it's relating to that behavior of the heart more specifically. But what it allows the heart to do is to basically swell, like literally when you're like, oh, my heart is
Like
so
the
full.
Aw.
Yes, that it acts kind of like, we didn't go too deep into relaxin, but relaxin is also one of the chemicals that's going to be produced in that development of an embryo. And that allows all the ligaments of the mother's body to just become more diffuse, to like lengthen automatically and just kind of stretch. And so that atrial natriuretic peptide in the heart allows the heart to expand and carry and circulate blood more efficiently. That's going to obviously impact the consciousness, that as the brain is like moving through a faster, more available, more organized blood supply, like you're going to feel that on a conscious level. But also, like, if you have fallen in love, or you have like had a deep moment of like connection, or a deep moment of loss, that both will give you that kind of inversion sensation of being able to distinguish the heart literally becoming more expansive and being able to carry more fluid in the chambers of the heart, and also in the vasculature of the heart itself, in that, you know, the heart is a muscle, right? And so it's also filled with fluid in the walls of the heart, and all of that is going to get kind of that expanded effect. So that's pretty cool.
Does palpating a specific like gland, like literally putting your hands outside of it and touching it, does that increase the amount of hormone that's being produced there, or is it all internal chemical building?
To some extent, you can kind of possibly accelerate the emission of the hormone, but because, yeah, like as you're observing, that hormones have to be constructed. They're not like being built by being pressed on. So you might, you know, to some small amount, exactly, increase the circulation of the material that's already there. But we don't generally, like as massage therapists, to like root this back in, we're not going to be attempting to affect the endocrine system so much by direct physical contact. But if you do kind of go down the rabbit hole of the endocrine system and get really interested in that, and possibly energy work as well, like we do see like measurable impact of the emission of the hormones as we help kind of organize energetically from the outside. The endocrine glands are all really intersected with the nervous system, and we'll talk more about that when we come back after break. But coordinating the electrical signaling, electromagnetic field of the body is going to have a big impact on them.
Because even mentioning it, it's like,
Yeah.
helps them, maybe helps a person regulate it
Mm-hmm.
once they're aware, like,
Right.
lungs can do this.
Anything that we put our awareness on is going to literally make more energy resources available in that area. So yeah, you can absolutely rehearse that. And we already tapped a little bit into, we're wandering around a smidge here, but we talked about the pineal gland more directly. And we don't really need to like drop down all the like much more recent information, but the melatonin is really the take home on the pineal gland. But you can easily find people who have that may be making claims to have adjusted the behavior of their pineal gland with all kinds of different, like looking straight into light, stuff like that is really interesting. And we can circle more back into that. And as to the pituitary gland, what we've got going on there is a lot of growth regulation, a fair amount of, as Karen was mentioning, the secondary sex characteristics and the reproductive behavior is getting regulated from there. We're also kind of regulating the melanocytes. We're giving information from the pituitary gland that's going to go out into those melanocytes in the skin that are determining our actual skin tone.
So I can be Hawaiian if I want to.
I don't know. You might be able to get an effect on there. I'm always interested in, we've got like monks meditating in the mountains of Tibet doing like competitions of getting sheets wet and sitting in the snow and like cooking up their body temperature as high as possible. Like it seems to be that as soon as somebody's like, I wonder if I could get my body to do that. Like if you have 20 years to spend on it alone, you probably can.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. We've got stimulating hormones that are just coordinating and interacting with the rest of this cascade, going still on this pituitary gland idea. We've got the pituitary gland talking to the rest of the descending endocrine system as well. Okay.
We didn't talk about the parathyroids or the thyroid.
Yes. The thyroid and the parathyroids they're kind of like really snuggled up. The parathyroids are almost more like little like dots on the thyroid. And so they're, you could say, like kind of specialized tissue. So the thyroid is going to be making the thyroxine and thyrocalcitonin and some other specific hormones there. And then the parathyroids are basically making PTH, parathyroid hormone. Let me see if I've got the specific purpose of the parathyroid hormone is to increase the level of calcium in the blood. So that's going to help us upregulate our ability to supply and build bone tissue.
Oh, that's important for the postmenopausal lady.
Absolutely. And that's one of those things that can be impacted by behavior where, like, they'll start instructing you to do more impact within management. Like you don't want to do anything that's like jarring your joints past where they need to go, but you do need a certain amount of like vibration from the ground in order to keep the calcium building system stimulated. Yeah. So when people just sit down for a long time, the bone tissue is going to really effectively get like managed and downregulated. But if you keep walking, keep like doing a few jumping jacks, like even just stomping on the floor, especially straight into the heel, is gonna like create that kind of jarring sensation there. So that's pretty cool. And then that group of the rest of the thyroid hormones are really involved in the protein synthesis and basically giving instructions to cells of the timing of growth and maturity. And then you've got thyroid stimulating hormone, which is like kind of a funny interesting one where the thyroid makes a chemical to tell itself to make more chemicals. And this is part of where you can get that like spiral where like hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism can basically are, of course, hypo is below, lower than expected level production of thyroid hormone, and hyperthyroidism is overproduction. So those are going to regulate like the energy available to the body and how much support is given to that growth process on the cellular level. And I think right now is a pretty good time to pause for a break. And we'll jump back in to kind of flesh out some of these concepts a little bit more.